For far too long, we have looked at creativity as solely personal genius, something to be owned, packaged, and commodified, conceptualizing it as inner genius that we express outwardly, something that is purely a product of our personal talents, discipline, or vision. But the truth is, we've got it all wrong. This modern way of thinking is new. It's limited, it's individualistic, and it misses the fullness of what creativity really is and what it can be. Creativity is a relationship. It is a conversation with the past, present, and future. It's bigger than ourselves. I see it as a group project telling the human story, leaving a blueprint for those to come after. So today, I invite you to broaden your understanding of creativity and deepen your own creative practice through this discussion of ancient and indigenous understandings of inspiration. Today, I'm here to remind you that the muse is real, and we're going to explore a deeper vision of creativity, one that is communal, spiritual, and ancient. All right. Let's dive in. Before we conceptualize a muse as a singular person that inspired a singular artist, in ancient Greece, the muses were living forces to be invoked, honored, and worked with. Creativity was not something you produced on your own. It was a gift, a force, a presence, a sort of relationship between humans and the divine. The muses were daughters of Zeus, the king of gods, and Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. And their parentage is significant because in this way, creativity emerges from divine authority and memory, reminding us that inspiration is as much about recalling what has come before us as it is about imagining something new. So let me quickly acquaint you with the 9 muses and what parts of creativity they govern. I'm gonna put them up on the screen so that you can see who they are, but I'm not going to go through each and every one of them because we have a lot to discuss today. Maybe I'll do another video that focuses solely on the muses. So ancient poets would invoke these muses at the start of their work, acknowledging that creativity was not theirs alone. For example, Homer begins the Iliad with "Sing, O Muse," which is a call for guidance, a plea for participation in a flow of inspiration that is larger than any one individual. He invites the muse to channel her story through him. Hesiod, Virgil, and other ancient writers followed the same practice. And this shows us that ancient societies conceptualized creative work as a dialogue with forces beyond the self. The Greeks also understood inspiration through daemons, intermediate spirits that guide, warn, and spark insight. And I'm not talking about the Christian version of demons. This is a little bit different. And Socrates famously described his daemon as a voice that restrained him from error. And this demonstrates that wisdom and creativity often arrive as counsel and guidance from something outside ourselves. Later, the Romans adapted these ideas with the concept of the genius, a personal guiding spirit that accompanies each individual. For Roman creators, genius was not a trait to claim as one's own. It was a presence to be honored, a force that enabled creative or intellectual work. Every person, every household, even every place was thought to have a genius. And only much later did the language shift to speak of someone being a genius. Originally, genius was not what you were, but who walked beside you. The muses, daemons, and genius reveal a worldview in which creativity is relational, spiritual, and communal. Ancient artists and creatives did not claim ownership over inspiration. Instead, they received it, tended to it, and offered it back to the world. And in doing so, they participated in a sacred dialogue that connected the human, the divine, and the collective memory of their culture. So when we look at the world through ancient eyes, creativity is never a lonely act of self-expression. It is a dialogue. It is invocation. It is being present. The poet listens, the painter receives, the philosopher obeys the nudges of a daemon. The Roman honors the genius of the household or the land. And in each case, the artist's task is not to dominate inspiration, but to court it, respect it, and remain open to it. And long before the Greeks, African traditions also understood creativity as inseparable from spirit. In many cultures, art was not an isolated pursuit, but a channel of divine energy, a means of aligning human life with cosmic order. In Yoruba cosmology, the creative force is called Ashe, the divine power that makes things happen. Ashe flows through words, songs, drumming, prayer, and ritual. And a praise poet doesn't simply invent clever lines. They activate Ashe, giving spoken words the power to heal, affirm, and transform. And to speak without Ashe is empty, but to create with Ashe is to participate in the very life force of the universe. Among the Dogon of Mali, creativity is linked to Nommo, the generative power of the spoken word. And this resonates a lot with me because it makes me think about the power of the tongue in the African American community and how we would get in trouble for speaking negative things because we would be using that power to speak that into our lives. But that's just a quick aside. Back to the Dogon. According to Dogon cosmology, Nommo was a primordial being who brought order to the world through speech. For the Dogon, words are not inert symbols. They are alive. Every utterance participates in shaping reality. So this means to sing, chant, dance, or tell a story is not a simple performance. It is doing the work of the universe, weaving the world back into harmony. In ancient Egypt, creation itself was understood as an artistic act. The god Ptah, patron of craftsmen and builders, was said to have created the world through thought and speech. The Memphite theology describes how Ptah first conceived the world in his heart and then brought it forth through the tongue. Creativity here is not about invention, but alignment, aligning human craft with divine pattern. A sculptor or architect was not merely producing objects, but extending the divine act of creation. We also see this in performance traditions among the Akan of Ghana. Drumming is not just rhythm, but language. Master drummers can speak proverbs and genealogies through drum patterns, calling communities to remember who they are. And among the Shona of Zimbabwe, Mbira music is used in ceremonies to summon ancestors. The music is an invitation, a portal through which spirit enters and joins the living. And what ties these examples together is this: creativity is never a private possession. It is relational. It belongs to the community, to the ancestors, to the divine. A song belongs as much to the one who first sang it as to those who taught it, those who dance to it, and those yet unborn who will inherit it. Even in everyday life, creativity flows through rituals. Hairstyles, textiles, body adornment all carry symbolic meaning, connecting individuals to lineage and cosmology. An African mask is not simply art, it is a living presence. A story is not simply narrative, it is moral instruction, ancestral memory, and spiritual practice. So, when we talk about creativity in African traditions, we are talking about more than self-expression. We are talking about a sacred trust. To create is to invoke the power of your Ashe, to honor the word of Nommo, to align with the divine craft of Ptah, to awaken memory with drum and song, to carry the ancestors forward. Creativity in these traditions is inseparable from life itself. It reflects the pulse of the community and shares the voice of ancestors and the breath of spirit. And the vision of creativity as relational and spiritual is not unique to Africa or Greece. It appears in indigenous cultures across the world. When we look at these traditions, we find creativity tied to cosmology, ceremony, and community. Take the Navajo or the Diné people, for example. Central to their worldview is hozho, a concept that means beauty, balance, harmony, and right relationship. To create, whether weaving, sand painting, or song, is to participate in hozho, to restore balance to the world. And when we look closely at Diné sand paintings, we see that they are not artworks in the Western sense. Instead, they are sacred designs made during healing ceremonies, prayers embodied in color and pattern. Once their purpose is fulfilled, they are destroyed because their value is not in permanence or display, but in their role within ceremony. Creativity here is medicine. In Maori culture of Aotearoa or New Zealand, creativity flows from wairua, the spiritual dimension of life. The Maori carving tradition, wakairo, is not only about aesthetic form, but about genealogy. And when a carver sits down to create a woodworking, they don't impose their will on the wood. They release what is already inside, guided by ancestral presence. The work is accompanied by ritual, chants, prayers, and offerings to acknowledge that the creative act is a collaboration between the artists, the ancestors, and the materials themselves. In many First Nation traditions in North America, songs and dances are received through dreams or visions. A person doesn't claim to compose a song in the Western sense. They say the song was given to them by spirit. Among the Anishinaabe, the Medewiwin holds that songs are gifts from the Manitou, the spiritual beings. The singer's responsibility is to protect and pass down the song. In this sense, creativity is a gift and stewardship, not invention or ownership. Among the Lakota, the vision quest is a rite of passage where individuals fast and pray in solitude, seeking visions from the spirit world. Many return with songs, dances, or symbolic knowledge, which are then woven into communal life. These creative gifts are not seen as personal property, but as responsibilities entrusted by spirit for the well-being of the people. Even in everyday objects, creativity is sacred. Among the Pueblo peoples, pottery carries a prayer. Designs are not simply decorative, but encode cosmology, rain, fertility, the cycles of life. A pot is not just a vessel for food, it is also a vessel for story and ancestral knowledge. And across these indigenous worlds, a pattern emerges. Creativity is received, not owned. It is always embedded in community and ceremony. It is inseparable from cosmology. The way the people understand the world and the order of the universe is reflected in their creative practices. A song might come in a dream. A carving embodies ancestral lineage. Painting might serve as medicine. In every case, art is not just expression. It is how we relate to each other, the world around us, and to our ancestors. In my research, I found that in nearly all of these traditions, creativity is personified as feminine. The Greek Muses, the Yoruba Orisha Oshun, who inspires song and poetry. Even the earth itself is understood as a generative mother across cultures. This isn't accidental. Feminine energy represents receptivity, fertility, gestation, the ability to bring forth something new. Creativity, whether understood as Muse, as spirit, or as earth, is aligned with the feminine principle of bringing what is unseen into form. But this doesn't mean that creativity belongs only to women or those with wombs. Rather, it reminds us that to be creative, we must be in touch with our feminine qualities: openness, receptivity, patience. It teaches us that inspiration is not something to be conquered, it is to be courted. When we take a step back and look at modern understandings of creativity, we see a major disconnect. And I realize that so much has been forgotten along the way. The Enlightenment period, the rise of rationalism, the commodification of art under capitalism, all shifted our sense of creativity from something relational to something individual, from spirit to skill, from dialogue to ownership. We begin to speak of being a genius instead of having one. We prize originality over continuity. We begin to isolate the artist from the community, from ritual, from the sacred. And in doing so, we diminished creativity. We made it smaller. We might have even made it a little hollow. But the beautiful thing is, reclaiming our creative birthright can mean returning to the old ways and restoring our understanding of the relational and communal nature of creativity. We can again understand creativity not as an achievement, but as a relationship. And this shift will change everything. Instead of obsessing over being original, we might focus on being receptive. Instead of fearing writer's block, we might treat silence as a time when the muse has simply stepped away and trust that she will return. Instead of feeling pressured to own every idea, we might honor that ideas move through us and our job is simply to steward them well. Creativity then becomes less about pressure and more about partnership, less about possession and more about participation. Across traditions, Yoruba, Dogon, Diné, Māori, Anishinaabe, Greek, the message is clear. Creativity is not a possession. It is a presence. It is Ashe spoken into the world. It is Nommo's living word. It is hozho woven into balance, wairua carved into wood, a dream song entrusted to be carried forward. In all these ways, creativity is not just what we make, it is who we are in relation to spirit, to community, to ancestors, to the living world. From this day forward, I want you to walk with this knowing. The muse is real. She is ancient, she is communal, and she is waiting for us to remember her. So when you create, remember, you are not creating alone. You are stepping into a stream that has always been flowing, one that carries gods and ancestors, dreams and visions, songs and stories, a stream that reminds us that every act of creation at its heart is an act of remembering and an act of belonging. All right, that's all I have for you today. I hope this discussion left you with some useful insight that will deepen and enrich your creative practice. And if it did, do me a favor and do two things. Hit the like button on the way out and share this video with someone else who needs to hear it. And remember, creativity is your birthright to reclaim. I'll see you in the next video.